Welcome to Shadows of the Past, and on today's episode we will be talking about ancient Mesopotamia and the Anunnaki. Ancient Mesopotamia occupies a foundational place in the history of civilization and in the history of myth. Long before the literary traditions of classical Greece or the scriptural canons of later monotheistic religions, the peoples of Sumer, Akkad, Babylonia, and Assyria developed written accounts of creation, divine rule, human purpose, catastrophe, and death. These accounts were not merely stories in the casual sense of the term. They formed part of a broader intellectual effort to explain how the world came into being, how power was distributed among the gods, why human beings were created, and why suffering, labour, and mortality structure ordinary life. Among the many divine names that survive from these traditions, few have been subjected to more misunderstanding in the modern imagination than the Anunnaki. In popular culture, the word often evokes theories about extraterrestrials, lost technologies, or hidden interventions in the human past. Yet, in the historical record of ancient Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki are not alien beings, but a group of deities whose character and function vary across texts, periods, and theological settings. They belong to the language of religion and myth, not to the language of astronomy, biology, or technological history. A formal study of the Anunnaki requires that these two interpretive worlds be kept apart. On the one hand stand the cuneiform sources and the scholarship devoted to translating and contextualizing them. On the other stands a much later body of speculative writing that treats myth as concealed reportage and reads divine names as evidence for alien contact. The distinction matters because ancient Mesopotamian texts are highly sophisticated works of religious and literary thought. They encode political theology, ritual ideology, reflections on kingship, and deeply rooted assumptions about cosmic order. The Anunnaki appear within this framework as members of the divine order, sometimes associated with the highest gods, sometimes with judgment, and in later traditions, often with the underworld. As the Orak Project on ancient Mesopotamian gods and goddesses states, the term Anunna indicates a group of gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon, while also noting that its meaning shifts over time and can designate different divine collectivities in different contexts. Such variation does not weaken the historical case. Rather, it reveals the complexity of Mesopotamian religion itself. To understand the Anunnaki, one must therefore read them as Mesopotamians did, as participants in a sacred cosmos ordered by divine hierarchy, ritual obligation, and mythic explanation. This approach also helps explain why Mesopotamian mythology resists simple summary. Unlike a later religious system defined by a single canon, Mesopotamian religion developed over millennia and across multiple political centers, each with its own patron gods, scribal traditions, and ritual priorities. The same divine figure might be emphasized differently in a Sumerian hymn, an Akkadian epic, a royal inscription, or a liturgical lament. The Anunnaki are a particularly revealing case of this fluidity. They are not presented as a neatly fixed council with one universally agreed roster. Instead, the term names a divine category, whose range changes according to literary context and historical period. Britannica therefore describes the Anunnaki as a class of gods within the ancient Mesopotamian pantheon, noting that their names and functions vary according to the available texts. This flexibility is characteristic of Mesopotamian thought, in which theological language was often cumulative rather than systematic. Gods could overlap in function, absorb local traditions, or be reorganized within changing cosmological schemes. The Anunnaki should be read against this background of religious dynamism rather than as the stable designation of a hidden, non-human species. The civilizations of ancient Mesopotamia developed in the fertile but demanding lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and their religious imagination was shaped by both the opportunities and instabilities of that environment. Irrigation agriculture required labor, planning, and administration. Floods and droughts reminded communities that order was fragile. Cities depended on kingship, temples, and specialized bureaucracies to survive. It is therefore unsurprising that Mesopotamian myths so often imagine the universe itself as an organized polity. The cosmos is not portrayed as a random assemblage of forces, but as a structured realm governed through rank, decree, duty, and reciprocal obligation. Myths explain how order emerges from chaos, how authority becomes legitimate, and how human beings fit within a world already inhabited by powerful divine agents. In this setting, divine assemblies are not decorative details, but central expressions of theological logic. The gods deliberate, assign functions, judge actions, and uphold or disrupt the stability of the world. The Anunnaki belong to this model of sacred administration. Their significance lies less in vivid individual narrative than in collective authority. They appear as gods involved in decreeing fates, occupying cosmic offices, and, in some traditions, serving as judges whose authority reflects the larger Mesopotamian conviction that the universe is governed through hierarchy and law-like order. The language of fate is especially important here. Mesopotamian religion repeatedly links divine legitimacy with the power to determine destinies, fix boundaries, and maintain distinctions. To decree a fate was not simply to predict an outcome. It was to establish the authorized pattern of reality. The Aurak entry on the Anunna observes that one of the main functions of the Anunna gods was to decide the fates, a phrase that helps clarify why the group mattered in literary and ritual imagination. In a world where political power, agricultural survival, and family continuity all depended on forces beyond ordinary human control, divine judgment over fate represented an ultimate theological guarantee that events unfolded within an intelligible, if not always benevolent, order. The Anunnaki thus belong to a conceptual field that includes kingship, law, ritual, and cosmic stability. Their presence in myth marks the point at which power becomes collective, sanctioned, and transcendent. They do not introduce a foreign technology into human history. They symbolize the sacred administration of existence itself. In the textual record, the Anunnaki are best understood as a collective designation for a group of deities, rather than as a single, unchanging pantheon. This point is essential because many modern misunderstandings begin with the assumption that the word must refer to one clearly bounded body of beings with a uniform origin and purpose. The evidence does not support such simplicity. Aurak describes the Anunna as a group whose meanings differ across time periods, noting that in the Sumerian corpus, the term can indicate the highest gods of the pantheon, but may also refer to the gods of a particular city or cultic setting. One text even speaks of the 50 Anunna of Eridu, demonstrating that the term could be localized and context-dependent. Britannica likewise stresses that the precise meaning of the term remains ill-defined, not because scholars are careless, but because the ancient evidence itself preserves multiple usages. Some texts associate the Anunnaki with the descendants of An, the sky god. Others place them in relation to major deities such as Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, and Inanna. Still others emphasize their role in the underworld, where they appear as judges or rulers of the dead. The complexity of the term is therefore a sign of historical depth, not of mystery in the sensational sense. Their association with the underworld is particularly revealing. In later Mesopotamian traditions, the Anunnaki are frequently contrasted with the Igigi, who are more closely linked to heaven, while the Anunnaki come to be imagined as powers of the Netherworld. This development appears in both literary and interpretive traditions, and helps explain why the group is sometimes described as judges of the dead. Britannica notes that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Anunnaki are described as judges of the dead, and the idea is echoed in the Sumerian myth commonly known as Descent of Inanna to the underworld, in which they judge the goddess for her transgression. Here again, the theological meaning is unmistakable. The Anunnaki signify order not only in creation, but also in death. They are linked to the regulation of boundaries between life and death, heaven and earth, rebellion and submission. Such roles are coherent within a religion that imagined both the cosmos and the afterlife as ordered domains under divine oversight. They do not resemble extraterrestrial colonists. They resemble what Mesopotamians said they were: divine authorities situated within a sacred system of judgment and rule. The Anunnaki become especially important when viewed within the broader frame of Mesopotamian creation literature. Creation myths in Mesopotamia were not scientific attempts to describe material origins in modern terms. They were theological narratives that explained how order, authority, labour, and human obligation came to exist. In the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, these themes are dramatized through a sequence of divine conflict, culminating in the rise of Marduk, the god of Babylon. The famous opening lines, "When in the height heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name," establish a scene of primordial indeterminacy in which the world has not yet been differentiated into stable forms. What follows is not simply a tale of violence, but an account of political and cosmic reorganization. Through battle, speech, decree, and assignment, a chaotic universe becomes an ordered realm. Britannica summarizes the epic by noting that Marduk brings order to chaos and thus becomes the lord of the gods of heaven and earth. The significance of this transformation cannot be overstated. Enuma Elish presents creation as the establishment of legitimate sovereignty. Cosmic order is inseparable from divine kingship, and the arrangement of the gods within that order reflects Babylonian ideas about political hierarchy and sanctioned rule. Within this framework, the Anunnaki appear as part of the divine administration established after Marduk's victory. Orak notes that in Tablet 6 of Enuma, Elish Marduk assigned 300 Anunna gods for duty in the heavens, and an equal number for the Netherworld, giving a total of 600. The detail is striking because it reflects a world imagined in terms of organized offices and distributed responsibilities. Creation here does not end with the mere appearance of land, sky, or humanity. It culminates in the ordering of divine roles. the Anunnaki help signify that the universe is a governed system. Their placement in heaven and the Netherworld suggests the extension of divine order across all cosmic zones. Reading context, this scene belongs to the language of temple states and imperial theology, where the distribution of duties mirrors bureaucratic and royal structures familiar to Mesopotamian life. Modern ancient astronaut interpretations flatten this symbolism into literalism and thereby miss the literary sophistication of the epic. The Anunnaki are not described as a technologically advanced expedition. They are part of a sacred administration whose arrangement affirms the triumph of order over disorder. If Enuma Elish emphasizes cosmic kingship, the Atrahasis epic offers an equally important reflection on labour, suffering, and the purpose of humankind. The opening of the poem presents a divine world under strain. In Stephanie Dalley's translation, the text begins, "When the gods, instead of man, did the work, bore the loads, the gods' load was too great, the work too hard, the trouble too much." The complaint of the lesser gods initiates the crisis. They labour to maintain canals and the infrastructure of the world until rebellion breaks out against the burden imposed upon them. A version of the text summarised in scholarly discussions similarly reports that the great Anunnaki made the Agigi / carry the workload sevenfold. These lines are crucial because they place the Anunnaki within a hierarchy of divine administration and connect creation directly to the problem of labour. Humanity is not fashioned in order to explore, conquer, or perfect the earth in a modern, secular sense. Human beings are created so that the burdens of maintenance, agriculture, and cultic service may be transferred from divine to human hands. The myth thereby encodes a theological anthropology. To be human is to live within an economy of work, ritual, and dependence. This explanation of human origin is profoundly different from modern ideas of biological engineering, and it is one of the strongest reasons scholars reject extraterrestrial readings of the text. William L. Moran, writing on the creation passage in Atrahasis, treated the episode as an important witness to Babylonian reflection on the origins and nature of man. His phrasing captures the interpretive stakes. The epic is not interested in the technical manufacture of a species by outside intelligences. It is interested in the existential condition of human beings as workers, worshippers, and mortal creatures. The inclusion of divine substance in human creation, often through the mixing of clay with the blood of a slain god, is not evidence of genetic experimentation. It is a symbolic explanation for why humans possess both dependence and consciousness, both vulnerability and a tenuous relation to the divine. The human condition, as imagined in Atrahasis, is inseparable from toil, reproduction, noise, and eventual mortality. These themes belong to mythic anthropology and theodicy. They ask why life is burdensome and why order must be maintained at such cost, not whether visitors from another planet manipulated early hominids. Taken together, Enuma Elish and Atrahasis reveal two complementary dimensions of Mesopotamian thought. The first explains how the cosmos becomes ordered under legitimate divine sovereignty. The second explains why humans occupy a subordinate but indispensable place within that order. In both cases, the Anunnaki are meaningful because they mark points of divine organization rather than points of technological intervention. They help define the structure of a universe in which rank, duty, and fate are paramount. This is one reason Mesopotamian myths have had such lasting influence on later traditions. They offer durable models for thinking about creation as the imposition of order, the burden of labour as foundational to society, and human life as dependent upon powers beyond itself. To read the Anunnaki correctly is therefore to see them as part of a much larger theology of cosmic management, one that binds together heaven, earth, kingship, ritual, and death. The interpretation of the Anunnaki as extraterrestrials is a distinctly modern construction and should be studied as part of 20th and 21st century popular culture, rather than as part of ancient Mesopotamian religion. The most influential version of the claim was popularized by Zecharia Sitchin, whose books argued that Mesopotamian texts preserve memories of alien visitors who came to Earth, manipulated humanity, and left traces in mythic language. These ideas gained a wide audience because they fused several attractive modern themes: fascination with UFOs, distrust of academic expertise, the allure of secret knowledge, and the hope that the ancient past conceals technologically spectacular truths. Yet none of these motives can substitute for philological evidence. The primary sources do not describe spacecraft, advanced machinery, or literal extraterrestrial colonization. They describe gods, divine assemblies, decrees, ritual duties, and acts of mythic creation. Aurak's characterization of the Anunna as a group of gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon, and Britannica's description of them as a class of gods within the ancient Mesopotamian pantheon, both reflect the scholarly consensus. The term belongs to religion, not to speculative astronomy. To turn the Anunnaki into aliens requires wrenching them out of their linguistic and literary setting, and then imposing a modern genre expectation upon them. From an academic perspective, the greatest weakness of ancient astronaut theories is methodological. They proceed by selective literalism. Passages that sound unusual to modern ears are treated as coded technical descriptions, while the surrounding mythic structure is ignored. Divine epithets become engineering terms. Cosmological symbolism becomes hidden astronomy. Narrative poetry becomes failed science. Such readings are persuasive only if one begins by assuming that ancient religious language cannot mean what it says. Scholarship proceeds in the opposite direction. It reconstructs the historical language, compares manuscripts, situates myths within ritual and political settings, and asks how ancient audiences would have understood the texts. On that basis, the evidence points consistently toward theology and mythology. The Anunnaki occupy roles comparable to those of other divine collectives in ancient religion. They legitimate order, judge, witness, decree, and inhabit the structured world imagined by the culture that named them. The modern alien version of the Anunnaki, by contrast, reveals contemporary anxieties about origins, authority, and hidden power. It is itself a myth of modernity, one that uses the prestige of antiquity to authorize present-day fantasies of revelation. A careful reading of Mesopotamian sources thus leads to a clear conclusion. The Anunnaki are not relics of an extraterrestrial episode in human prehistory, but a historically attested category of deities within one of the world's oldest religious traditions. Their identities are fluid, because Mesopotamian religion itself was historically layered and regionally diverse, yet their functions remain intelligible within that setting. They decree fates, participate in divine assemblies, regulate cosmic and underworld order, and appear within myths that explain why the world is structured as it is. In Enuma Elish, they belong to the administration of a cosmos ordered after conflict. In Atrahasis, they appear within an account of labour, divine burden, and the creation of humanity. These narratives do not ask to be decoded as hidden science. They ask to be interpreted as myth, theology, and cultural memory. The enduring fascination of the Anunnaki lies precisely in this contrast between ancient meaning and modern reinvention. When returned to their original context, they illuminate a civilization that understood reality through sacred hierarchy, ritual responsibility, and the constant tension between order and disorder. They reveal how Mesopotamians imagined the connection between divine power and human labour, between cosmic sovereignty and mortal vulnerability, and between the visible world and the unseen realm of judgment. Modern extraterrestrial readings, however imaginative, obscure these insights by reducing complex religious symbols to sensational claims. A more rigorous interpretation does the opposite. It restores the Anunnaki to Mesopotamia, and in doing so, allows them to speak with their proper historical voice. That voice is not the language of hidden, alien visitation. It is the language of mythic explanation, one of humanity's earliest and most enduring attempts to understand creation, authority, suffering, and the place of human beings in an ordered but precarious world. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Check back next week where we will continue to expand on ancient civilizations, their mythology and their cultural significance in today's modern society.